All right, I'm back. So what has happened on this thing is I got the rocker covers on, and that went pretty easy. No difficulties there. I did use pop rivets um, where it laps over the sill. And I can show you that later, but also used a big pop rivet with a big head on it right here. Couldn't find those little rubber spacers, so I ended up using just a piece of rubber hose. Only had one good threaded hole under here, but it seems to be holding pretty good. The front I haven't really worried about because it's pretty solid. So the rocker covers look really nice. I painted them with trim black. And on the outside, on the inside, I put that self-etching primer. So that went really well. Also shot the rear bumper with self-etching primer. And fiddled around with these license plate bulbs. I need to buy one. Who knows if the circuits work. I didn't even take the bumper off. I just mashed around the top and it worked out fine. So I've done all of that. Now this morning I'm going to go to these throttle cable, clutch cable, and speedo cable. I think I'm going to start with the speedometer cable. This is it here. Probably use the old one to pull it through. Let me get underneath here and start taking everything loose. Of course, that's the clutch, that's the speedo, and the speedo cable runs loose through the tunnel. So hopefully I won't have any problems pulling that through. The the clutch and the throttle cable, they go into conduits. That's the reason you see it has this collar on it, and then you thread that through the conduit. So I have to take a look at that. I probably need to use the old cables to pull those through just to be safe, because go quicker that way, I'm sure. All right, let me get into it and I'll shoot some more. The speedo cable is pretty straightforward. I just pulled the loose end through this opening here in the firewall, and then put a little bit of tape on this just so that the collar's loose. I'm going to slide this in and then get inside of there and fish it through the right openings. It actually runs alongside the wiring harness, which is convenient. So let me move inside. So yeah, here's the old cable. So it just lays in beside the wiring harness, and those little holders, runs under the cross member and then dives down in here. So when I read, you can just reach up to the speedo and disconnect it. So I'm gonna put a packing blanket in here so I don't screw my back up. And yeah, I went ahead and took the seats out. It's just so much easier without the seats in here. Did some more dressing on some of these wires. Just got them taped up so it doesn't look like a rat's nest. And here's those pop rivets I used on the rocker covers. So I mean, I don't plan on taking those on and off, and pop rivets are easier to drill out than rusty screws, that's for sure. All right, let me get this speedo cable in there and we'll move on. Okay, that was not pleasant, but I got it done. You can see that orange tape that I had on there for the collar. Let me see if I can get a shot underneath there. But yeah, that cavity you got to reach up into, I could barely get my hand in there to start the collar on the back of the speedo. Really, if you don't have one of those, you got hands the size of mine or bigger, you're screwed, because that needle nose is the only way to get up in there and get that collar on. So otherwise, I mean, running this is a cake. So next I'm going to tackle throttle cable, I think, and disconnect it from the back of the pedal and figure all that stuff out. So you got two like ball attachments, and those will pop off. The one to the front of the car is the linkage that goes up to the pedal, right? And then you can see the cable in down on the bottom. I'm gonna have to transfer that fitting to the new cable, and possibly use the old cable to pull the new one through. I'm gonna take a look at that. So let me get that off that linkage and we'll go from there. So you pull the old one through the firewall a little, put the new one in there and join them together inside of here, because the little opening in the firewall isn't big enough for both of them. And hopefully the conduit's big enough where now I can pull this on through, because I got my vice grips on the other end. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, come on, baby. Boy, that sucker's crumpling. Yay! Got it through. Alright. Yeah, getting them little balls together was not a lot of fun. And I discovered something else out once I got both those back on. I've got a bad bushing. That's the reason. Can barely see it in the middle of the frame there. It's the reason that lever is wobbling around so much. I'm going to try to get this thing running without addressing that for now, but yeah, it doesn't bode well. I thought that pedal assembly was in pretty good shape, but maybe not so much. All right, moving on to the clutch cable. So the clutch cable is a clevis with like a safety clip on there and a pin. That's going to be a lot of fun. You can see it at the top of the frame there. So just got to get that clip off of there. Pin should come out. It's going to be a lot of fun getting that pin back in there. All right, here we go. So that pin on that clevis would not come out. So I'm going to have to take the pedal assembly out, which I've already removed the throttle pedal. I mean, it's just a couple of 10mm bolts down into the floorboard. The pedal assembly, two 13mm nuts down here. Those bolts back there actually goes clean through the bulkhead into the master cylinder. So pedal assembly should pull off the top. I've already loosened up here. There was a washer holding the master cylinder, brake cylinder onto the brake pedal. So anyway, it all needs to be cleaned up anyway, so I guess this is just something that needed to happen. So the plan is to get the pedal assembly out and then just drag the cable that clevis, just drag the cable with it, and then hopefully I can attach the new cable as I'm pulling the pedal assembly out and drag it on through. So we'll see what happens. So I got the pedal cluster loose and I was yanking on the clutch cable. It wouldn't slide, and got back under here, and what I found was there's the conduit right there that the clutch cable goes through. You guys won't have this. That's my fuel line that I rerouted. And this conduit, you can see where it's been brazed right there. Somebody beat it into the tunnel, maybe because it was in the way during an engine swap, I don't know. So that was floating around inside of there. And also, if you look at the cable, it's got this collar that slides over that conduit, and that was froze up with rust. So I had to take a Dremel tool and cut that, meanwhile being very careful of the fuel line here. So that turned into a whole thing, but now the clutch cable is free. I'm going to attach the new one to it and get it ready to slide down that conduit. I'm also going to get up there in here with the Dremel and clean up these sharp edges, because that's not a good thing with that fuel line right there. So, you know, it's turned into an all-day deal doing 3 cables, but oh well. So that clutch cable would not stuff into that conduit taped together using the old one to pull it through, so I just pushed it in there. It's in the tunnel somewhere. I'll find it. And I kind of got this organized here where it makes sense. Got rid of some of the sharp edges. I'll put some body filler in that later, and that will keep it from making contact with those sharp edges. So I already routed the clutch cable back and the speedo cable into the transmission. Of course, all that'll get tie wrapped up nice and neat. So let's go over the bench and look at this pedal assembly. I mean, I'll show you exactly what was giving me all the problems was this clevis here. That little pin, you know, I'll be able to get it out now that I got it on the bench, but that pin should be part of this little keeper, and it's frozen into that arm right there. So I've got to press it out or whatever, and then I'm just going to clean this pedal assembly up, and maybe I'll be able to tighten up some of this stuff with just some, really needs the proper bushings, but once I clean it up I'll know more about it. Yeah, so on this throttle linkage, definitely bushings there, probably front and back. All the paint on this had come loose and was like floating around like leaves. Then on the clutch pedal, there's a bunch of play in that shaft. See it rocking back and forth. So that looks like a roll pin right there. Would have to come out. I think a couple of vendors sell kits, rebuild kits for these pedals. Shouldn't be too expensive. I mean, you can go all the way and repaint every single little part on this, but I'm not going to do that. I just need to tighten up the bushings and get it back in there. Okay, it took a couple days to get the parts, but I've got a set of bronze bushings here with the roll pin, and then this is a spring for the brake pedal. The spring for the clutch pedal was still intact, and then I've got a new rubber pad for which one? Guess it's a clutch pedal. So I'll try to shoot some of this stuff as I'm putting all this back together. Taking it apart is pretty straightforward. This is the orientation here. I painted this. It's got a little dust on it already. So I'm going to start sticking in the bushings and putting grease on them. And hopefully get this together here in a couple hours. So this is the orientation of how it goes back together again. This tube will slide inside of that other one. So the bigger bushing should go inside of that. And then the smaller bushing, well, let me piece together and figure it out. So yeah, I got the bigger bushings on the brake pedal tube, and then the spring set in there. It's really the only way it can go in, from what I can tell. So the spring is going to try to push the pedal forward. And then this tube should slide inside of the brake tube, and that hole mates up with that stud. So let me lube that up and get that in there. The medium-sized bushings go in the smaller tube, and I put the nut on. You can see how that stop keeps the brake from pushing forward too far. And then this rod will go inside of there, and the spring goes here, if I remember right, for the clutch. On the end of the clutch rod, there's a little small bushing, smallest one in the package. I'm just going to press that in here in the vise. And then there's 2 more bushings and a roll pin to go. So if you clamp the pedal assembly, the 2 bolts that go through the bulkhead with the nuts on them, of course, clamp that in your vise, it gives you good access to that roll pin without the whole thing scooting around on the bench. It's the best way I found. Alright, getting that roll pin back in there. It's not a lot of fun, but I got her. Also, I got the brake switch back on. So how that works is there's a collar on this plunger. That collar right there pushes. Apparently push down would be open and that would be closed in order to turn on the brake lights. I haven't tested it yet, but low priority. So I got the post for the throttle linkage in with the last two little bushings, and it's so much better. Now mine, the post had come loose from that lever, so I had to do a little welding there, but yeah, it's a huge difference. This is how it should look when it goes back in the car. You can see the brake engaging the switch. Now I'll probably have to pull that off to stab this post goes in the master cylinder, but once you get it in there, you can slide it back on here, and all it is a washer and a cotter key. So no worries there. Everything's so much better now, so much tighter. I'm gonna get it back in the car. Okay, I got all the pedals hooked back up. The clevis thing for the clutch was troublesome, but I did get it in there, and with the safety catch on it, everything feels a lot better. Still not completely happy with the travel on the clutch pedal, but it has to do, well, with the age of the clutch and the cable. That tube back there might not be in the right position. So that conduit that runs through the tunnel is an important part of how the clutch pedal behaves. So more work on that, and probably a new clutch at some point. Once I get it on the road, I'll know when it starts slipping. So anyway, that's a conclusion to the control cable reroute and pedal assembly rebuild and all that stuff. I mean, I'm pleased that I did it. I didn't really have a choice, but now it's done and I can move on. Thanks for watching.